All right, well, we reached the top of the hour, so I want to make sure you get the full time. I am going to first thank everyone for joining this session titled You, Me, and We, Inclusive Pedagogy Through Windows and Mirrors, presented by Kari Frisch, or is it Kari?
It's Kari. Thank you for
Kari
asking.
Frisch. And just a couple little details for you all before we let her get started. First, we're using automated Zoom captions during this live event, and we will edit the recording transcripts before we share them so that they're more accurate. But if you want to use them right now, at the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see a closed caption button, or you may need to click on the 3 dots for the more, and to use that feature, just choose Show Subtitle, and you'll be viewing the transcript. Also, please pose your questions in the chat. I know Kari's been asking us to do that, so we'll be using that as a way to capture your questions and comments while she gives her presentation. And now I'd like to hand the microphone over to Kari.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share a little bit with all of you. But before we begin, I do want to recognize and pay tribute to the Indigenous peoples on whose land we come together to meet today. I'd like to thank them and their relatives for the care of the land and honor their place in history, while acknowledging the work that I still have individually and that we still have collectively to properly pay homage to them. In this small manner, I pay respects to them and their culture, both past and present. I recognize their continuing connection to the land, waters, and community, and will try to bring value, empathy, and inclusion to the space I am holding on this earth and in this space today. I'd like to close with a very special miigwech, or thank you, to our Anishinaabe of the lands where my particular campus is located. So, let me just say it's an honor to be here and a part of this very first equity conference. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, and I am hoping that it's just going to be the start of many more conversations and dialogue and networking that we all have in the future years to come. I'm looking forward to learning from you and with you over the next few days. And today we're going to be exploring You, Me, and We, Inclusive Pedagogy Through Windows and Mirrors. So I have lost my little green Zoom screen, so I just want to make sure you're all still seeing the presentation. Can somebody confirm that you're able to see the PowerPoint?
You bet.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, a little bit about me. My name is Kari Frisch, and I'm a communication instructor at Central Lakes College in Brainerd, Minnesota. Minnesota is right below Canada, and well, with all the news that we've had from our state lately, you probably know where we're located. Brainerd is located about 2 hours north of the Twin Cities, north of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I also want to share just a little bit about the SEED program. And the SEED program, S-E-E-D, stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. This is a program that was started out of Wellesley College in the late 80s. And I found out about it when I first started teaching in about year 2000. And I went through the Train the Trainer program in 2001. And this is the first introduction that I had to SEED. I wasn't really familiar with it before, but it's really all about the things that we're talking about here in this conference. It's about really taking a personal look at our own selves and about our own biases and about storytelling and connecting to people and learning more about others in order to be more inclusive and to recognize diversity and to be more empathetic and to take that and put it back into our classrooms. So I'm going to, because I'm sure maybe some of you haven't heard about it, I'm going to put a link for you in the chat. That's a little bit more about the SEED program itself. But as part of SEED, I was exposed to windows and mirrors theory. And the windows and mirrors theory is something that was first coined by Emily Stiles. And she wrote an essay in the late 80s there, as you can see, that kind of looked at this theory, and it had mostly to do with curriculum, looking at the texts and the books that children were surrounded with. And it had to do with like, how are we at recognizing the diversity of our students and then making sure that what we surround them by reflects who they are. So it really was about taking an explorative look and then trying to do better. Really, even though it started with this whole idea of books and content, we can really expand that now and include things like course design or redesign and course delivery. So it goes beyond just the content of the text that we're using, but really that's a good starting point too. But I want you to kind of have this more holistic view that it really can apply across the whole educational philosophy that you may have, the way you design and develop your courses, and the way that you actually apply that and deal with students, and how you treat yourself as well. So there's a few things that I should probably also, in case you're interested, that site also has her essay, but I will again put that in the chat link for you in case you want to see and learn a little bit more about that essay. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about this theory right away was that it recognized some key factors that kind of hit home to me. The first one was that there's really more than one way to see the world, right? And that there's a connection between eyesight and insight. I mean, just let that resonate for a second. A connection between eyesight and insight. So what we're seeing helps us connect to what we're trying to learn and how deep we learn those messages that your teachers and your peers are trying to share with you. It also kind of recognized the fact that no student acquires knowledge in an abstract, that learning is always personal. We can't help but learn through our own framework and how we see the world. It also doesn't take place in a vacuum. It's always contextual. I teach intercultural communication and interpersonal communication on my campus, and one of the things I tell my students about context is to think about the 5 W's and the H, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And that's kind of what context means. You can't remove any of those pieces without it affecting how you're learning, what you're learning, and how deep you're going to connect with that material. So when we stop to think about the fact that we're looking at what we're learning through our own frameworks, through our own worldview, we also have to then acknowledge that our classroom is full of students who come to us with different experiences, with different worldviews and different ways of seeing things based on their experiences. So that's how we have to sometimes treat our education too, and how we try to connect and reach out and engage all of our various diverse students. Again, I shared the link for you if you want to read a little bit more about the theory, but there's really basically 2 major components. You've got mirrors and you have windows. So the mirrors are a way for people to recognize, to see themselves in the material that you're presenting. The photo there that I included always kind of cracks me up, and I'm gonna be honest and let you know that that was just kind of like a fake photo that I wanted to I was testing my camera angle because I didn't want to have to worry about finding an image that I could have to ask permission for. So I was looking for something copyrighted free, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to take a picture of myself. So I got up, and this was early in the pandemic. This was probably about a year ago. You can see from the length of my hair that that photo is pretty old, right? But I took that photo just to, again, to see if it would work for me to hold my cell phone and take a picture of me in the mirror. And I thought, you know what? That's capturing a moment in time, and I'm going to just go ahead and use that photo. And I thought about replacing it, but it kind of cracks me up with my messy pandemic hair and how short it is compared to the length that it is now. And I decided to keep it. And in this presentation, you're going to find out that I share a lot of stories and I talk a lot about myself. And that's done intentionally because I feel that storytelling is a really powerful medium. It gets us a chance to connect with our students, to get at that more personal and passionate part of ourselves. And that if we can reach our students in that manner, that maybe it's going to be a little bit more meaningful for them. But it also goes to the fact that that's why it's important to have something that also they can connect to and see themselves back in, which is all what the mirror part of the windows and mirrors theory is about. Is there something that you're presenting to them that they can see and recognize in themselves? So again, the mirrors, when you look at it, it reflects your own image back. So that's the mirror. The window is something that doesn't necessarily reflect your image back. It allows you to see outside of yourself, outside of your own perspective. So you've got these two kind of metaphors, the windows and the mirrors. And Emily used the terms reveal and reflect, which are terms that I'll probably continue to use throughout this presentation. But those are the major components to it, is that you've got the windows and the mirrors, and you want something that reflects back, and also an opportunity to see outside of yourself, to become more empathetic. So before we go any further, I'm going to have us apply the windows and mirrors theory to see what you connect with. So I've already shared one little bit of a story, and I have a picture here of, again, myself, and I want you to identify either a window or a mirror that relates to your personal experience as you see in this picture. So go ahead and just in the chat, since we're using the chat, I also have some stuff on Padlet, but we'll go ahead and use the chat since most people have been posting things there. So go ahead and in the chat, identify, start with the word mirror or window, and then say what and why. So what are you connecting to as either a window or a mirror in this particular picture? Okay, Nadia says window. I don't like being cold. Anyone else? Mirror, Amber says seeing ice in the river on a trip to Niagara Falls. Mirror, used to live in Minnesota. Great. Awesome. Look at all the fun stuff coming up. Surface water. Somebody even connecting to the hoodie. And Kevin, I thought of you when I'm looking at this image, because I've got a sweatshirt on that says San Francisco, and I believe that's where you said you were located. So, and Francis says window, shorts in the snow. Awesome. All right, this is great. You guys can keep going. I'm going to kind of continue and talk a little bit more about this picture, because again, a picture that, you know, what's the cliche? It says 1,000 words, right? So there's so much going on there. There's so many ways that a person can connect to that, and maybe questions that come up. People might not understand like what is going on in the picture. Some might understand it right away, but we're all going to connect to it. And the minute you saw that picture, your mind was already going. So I really enjoy using these visual mediums because it kind of helps you connect in a very kind of tangible and a very authentic way, because your mind is racing, trying to figure out what's going on and how you connect, how you process that information. So just real quick, the picture is from the Mississippi River. I am actually sitting on a block of ice that's probably about 12 to 14 feet from the shore of the Mississippi River, because in the spring, often what happens in Minnesota when the rivers freeze over the winter, and then in the spring it warms up enough that the water is still flowing underneath the river, but the ice starts to break up, but it can't go down the river fast enough. So what happens is it kind of breaks up into these chunks, and it's sometimes called a breakout or an ice out. And those big blocks of ice bang into each other. And sometimes there's not enough space in the river for it to go flow down, that it actually forces the ice up and onto the edges of the shoreline. So again, this is about 12, 13 feet from the edge of the water, but it forced the ice chunks up that high. If you're ever in Minnesota and have heard an ice out, it can be really loud because water also echoes the sound. And so it's really something to hear and pretty amazing to see. You can probably Google some videos about different this is like big chunks on the river, but a lot of times the lakes will have smaller, like little ice crystals. And there's a spot, you can probably, I'll put it in here. I should probably find a video. Maybe Scott or somebody else can help me out here and find it for me. But Mille Lacs is a lake near where we live. And typically in the spring, there's a spot where the road is really close to the lake, and the water crystals will actually kind of come up, and it looks like they're dancing or kind of crawling as they're almost crossing the road. So there's a lot of kind of cool things in here. And again, stories help us connect to each other. So I really encourage you to start thinking not just about the windows and mirrors, but how you can use storytelling to reach everybody. So now you saw in the chat that a lot of people posted mirrors and a lot of people posted windows. But the really cool thing is there wasn't a right or wrong answer, right? You're all connecting to it in your own way. So let's do one more. So here's your next one. Here is picture number 2. What do you see in terms of windows or mirrors? Again, make sure you use the word window or mirror, and then what is happening and why you think it's a window or mirror. Oh, Brandy from Minnesota recognized I was making lefse. Oh, and then changed her mind and thought maybe crepes. All right, I am in fact making lefse, but even though I say that, I could be making an assumption that all of you know what lefse is. So again, when you use windows and mirrors, it's a great way to kind of introduce information and to, again, make the connection, make that bridge happen between maybe what's familiar and unfamiliar, or from unfamiliar to familiar. And great, some people are connecting to other things in the background, like wearing an apron or cooking. Again, I feel so fortunate that I teach intercultural communication and interpersonal communication, because I can make so many different things connect to my discipline. But really, food is a common denominator for all of us, right? And yet it is so different. And it's a great way to start some of those inclusive conversations, because it really can tie into so many different disciplines. So again, you can continue to post if you'd like, but a quick explanation. I am making lefse, which is a very thin potato-like, some people could say it's like a tortilla, or some like a crepe, but you've got special designed grill that's round, and a special lefse stick to get it on and off the grill. And it comes from Scandinavian cultures, and tends to be something that's very traditional in my family and in a lot of other Scandinavian families in my area, and still back in the homeland, and I'm sure probably around the United States. But again, food is a great common connector. So again, now you've applied the windows and mirrors just to 2 quick little photos, right? And you're probably already starting to think about it, hopefully in terms of your own disciplines or the position that you have on your campuses. And I want to take it to the next level, because even though I broke it up into windows or mirrors, kind of like a dichotomous thing, it's binary, like is it this or that? It's really not. It's really not either or. It's really both and. And that's where the beautiful part of this whole way of making it inclusive and more empathetic and more humanistic in our classrooms, it gets just really rich. So that's where I want to take us next, so that you can kind of see where all it can go. So I'm going to give you one more quick example. This is 3 photos. When I do this in my intercultural communication class, I have a whole video, but I just chose 3 still photos from that video just for our purposes here today. But when I do my section on norms and traditions, I show this video that kind of talks about my friend, who is the bride in this picture, and her, at the time, fiance turning into her husband, who was from Norway. She's from the United States, he was from Norway. And we ended up helping them plan their wedding, which ended up being done in Norway. So we went over to Norway and had the ceremony there. And the video is all about a whole bunch of different things that we did just for this one wedding, but I used it with the windows and mirrors application and have my students view it to kind of identify those windows and mirrors, but to get at that middle section. And that middle section, one of the typical examples that comes up is in this photo. You'll see on the far left a table with 2 goblets and a bowl sitting on the little kind of like stool. Well, what happened was, as part of this ceremony, which happened to involve Norwegian traditions, some westernized traditions, some even Celtic traditions, and this particular tradition, which I don't even know if I can call it, like a ritual, I should call it, because it's not really a tradition, because I've never even heard of it necessarily being used in a wedding this way before. But what happened was the bride's parents brought water from a lake where she used to live, and back here in Minnesota. And the groom's parents brought water from the river near the stream along their house. And what happened was, as part of the ceremony, that the parents who had the water in each of the goblets came together as part of the ceremony and emptied the water goblets into the bowl. And then the bride and groom there in the middle picture, you can see, are holding that bowl. And then as part of their ceremony, they took that bowl and walked behind them. You can kind of see in the photo a little bit of reflection of the water. Well, that's the start of a fjord. And so they kind of took a moment to themselves, had a private moment and said some things to each other, and then they emptied the water out into the fjord. And then came back and the ceremony kind of continued. But even though that water ceremony hasn't necessarily been done to my knowledge, I haven't been to a wedding before where you've emptied out water into the fjord, there's probably parts of it that, even though that's completely different, that it might be similar to something that you've seen at other weddings. So in the next minute, I'd like you to just, in the chat feature, talk about how that might be similar to something else you've seen, maybe at another wedding that you've attended. Does that, okay, lighting of the unity candle, great. Anybody else? Exchanging of the rings, unity candle, private moments, exactly. Mixing sand into the glass vessel, great. Oh, and there is somebody else who used the water to symbolize the union. That's awesome. Okay, so even though it's not exactly the same, the cool thing about the windows and mirrors theory is that there's this rich ground in the middle where people can find similarities. And it's kind of like a great metaphor for life, right? There are so many ways in which we're similar, and yes, there are ways in which we're different, but when we find that common ground in the middle, it's when it's easier to accept that information. We feel accepted. We understand things a little bit deeper, and on our own individual way, we're connecting to it, to how we came into the class and how we leave from the class. So that's why I really like the windows and mirrors theory, but I have to warn you that it's not that binary dichotomous metaphor that you might think at first. So let's go ahead and look a little bit more about how you can do this in your classes. So the application helps us recognize that no two students are the same, that we have varied backgrounds, we have different experiences and learning strengths, we have no right or wrong answers, which how often does that happen in education, right? And again, those stories connect us to each other, and when you can share a story, again, that's a great way of framing how we're learning without it necessarily having to be in that judgment mode of getting it right or wrong. It also connects to what I call the first degree of learning, which is the closer we can get to our own personal experience, hopefully the more integrated it's going to be with our own perceptions and values and experiences, and then hopefully the deeper that learning is going to be. It kind of stems from the Kevin Bacon theory that we're all connected through a minimum of 6 degrees, like I know you, you know somebody else who knows somebody else, and therefore I'm connected to that other person through degrees. So the same kind of can be attributed to how we present material and what material we present to students. So if I'm teaching something from a textbook and it's way away, it's like halfway around the world in my intercultural communication class, it's real hard for students to connect to that because it seems so far away. They're so distant from it. But if I can backtrack and bring that closer and closer, and maybe instead of learning about Buddhism, I interview a Buddhist monk, then my students know me and I know the monk, and my students are now just 2 degrees away. They know me and I know the Buddhist monk. So they're already a little bit more connected. But when I ask them to reflect on what the Buddhist monk said in my video, now they're connecting to it on a 1st degree of learning. You can also build inclusion in your classroom with this because you're able to introduce different perspectives. And hopefully that kind of leads to more inclusive teaching and more empathetic learning, which I think is also important because, as we talked about earlier, when we feel represented, when we feel acknowledged, that brings value to the class and already elevates our willingness and motivation to learn. And it's also very versatile. We can apply it to content, we can apply it to situations, contexts. Before I go any further, I'm noticing that my slides here, I want to just acknowledge as a communication person, you know, the death by PowerPoint and too many words on one slide. I realize that this is not the how to do the best PowerPoint presentation ever presentation, and that there is a lot of text on here, but I do this on purpose because I want these slides to be something that you can use, that you can share. And if somebody's not able to take 45 minutes to listen to a presentation, they hopefully can go through the 16 or 17 slides and see and read it. So I did just want to acknowledge that as a communication person, I have to know and honor the fact that these are really text heavy, but I want you to know I do that on purpose. And if somebody will help me remember, I'm going to share my slide deck with you at the end so that you have access to all of these slides as well. So again, the versatility of this, I think, has a lot of potential for a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different ways of presenting material. I used a couple of photos, but you can use case studies, you can use books and characters, you can do a poem, you can do a scenario or a video. There's lots of different content that you can use to spark or apply the windows and mirrors. It also helps students to connect to you as an instructor, so you can use it as a tool for them to get to know you. We know that relationships help in a classroom, and the stronger those relationships and the more supported people feel, the better. So this is just another way that you can share a little bit about yourself. Talk about why you're so passionate about your discipline. What made you go into your field? Students will connect to that, and you can use the windows and mirrors to get at some of those connections. It's a great first day activity, like an icebreaker. Think about math anxiety and public speaking, kind of backtracking to the point before. You might be really super passionate about math, but we know that there are a lot of students that struggle with math anxiety and a lot of students who fear public speaking. And often those students think they're the only ones. So this is a great way to say even present a case study or talk about your own experience, and then have students do something as simple as, on a scale of 1 to 7, where do you fall as far as your math anxiety? And then share those results and have students see, hey, I'm not the only one that has math anxiety in this class. Oh, that makes me feel better. Or somebody who's highly confident in public speaking might have another way of looking at their classmates if they understand, wow, 90% of the students in the class don't feel as confident as I do getting up and talking in front of people in this type of situation. So it's a great way to kind of gauge where other students are at and to help other students feel more comfortable and therefore hopefully more confident. Gives you that good kind of check-in with them. I use the multiple strengths and the learning style exam in the very beginning of my semester, and I try to tie this into various spots throughout my entire course design and how I deliver my class. So you can also kind of connect it to those multiple strengths. And just because one student, we kind of have a tendency, first of all, to teach how we best learn, and we kind of forget that there's other students that maybe that's not their strength. I mean, you probably already can guess, I'm an extrovert. I was a student constantly raising my hand and answering questions, and I didn't understand that introverted aspect of, oh, you need more time to process and to think before you say something, or just don't feel necessarily as comfortable as I do. So it's a good way, again, to help us become more empathetic, and as instructors, to make sure that we're designing assignments and reaching all of our learners, not just those that tend to have the same learning strengths as we do. Again, it's a good way to connect with other services that your campus might have. For example, I did a survey about how is everybody doing with COVID-19. Our campus is really great and has done amazing work in trying to combat food insecurity on our campus. And sometimes students are embarrassed to admit that they don't have access to food. And so again, just kind of, it's a great way to introduce some of those services that maybe you or your campus can help provide outside of the classroom and outside of your necessarily class content. But we all know things like food insecurity affects how a student does in the class as well. And again, we as instructors have to remember how we were taught, but maybe try even a little bit harder to reach those windows for us in our education and how to reach all of our students. So again, think about how can you personally open the window so that you are doing more with your classes and in different ways to reach those students. So we've got a few different kind of like subcategories here. The first is, you could think of this as a traditional approach. You present content to them, and then you have them apply the windows and mirrors either in a reflection paper, in small groups, in a survey, but you do the presenting of the content, and then they do the application. However, you can also do a more non-traditional approach, which is that you, me, or we provide the content. So the students share something, and then you, me, and we apply the windows and content to that. Think again about the different learning styles. Are there different ways that you can approach your assignments to give them ways that they personally feel more connected? So is there a spot in your semester where you can use a playlist, or you can have them create a playlist? Can they do a video or a cartoon, a graphic novel? I have an open pedagogy project with my honors class this semester, and I am so super excited. I haven't looked at it quite yet, but the project just came in. One of my students chose to create an escape room for her topic, and I am so super psyched about it. But that's like that thinking outside of the box, connecting on that personal level. She likes escape rooms, so it's a great way for her to connect to the material. So think non-traditionally about even how to get at the materials and who's providing the content, who the experts are, because we all have some expertise, and for sure we all have our own experiences. And again, our experiences, our stories can't be wrong, and those students can thrive in that kind of environment. This is not the first time I've heard the term scaffold today, and I was very happy when I heard it earlier, but think about that. Are there ways that you can scaffold your assignments? Have them think about what they thought was most exciting or most surprising about what they learned from hearing the windows and mirrors, so you can apply it and then reflect on that. I'm going to go back and explain the CDBO there that you see as the first example. When I used to teach face-to-face classes, I have been teaching completely asynchronous online for double digits now, and I'm not even sure how many years, quite a few. But when I taught face-to-face, and for several years when I taught online, I did this photo project where I had my students study oppression, and then they were asked to take photos of what they thought represented. Like if you could non-verbally show us a definition of what you think oppression, I should go in the same order, community, diversity, belonging, and oppression. Can you capture those moments with those 4 words, those 4 definitions with a photo? And then they shared them in class. And inevitably, when we did the windows and mirrors, the best part was that there would be photos that people took that a person was sure was going to be for one thing, and it turned out to be for something else. And there was that, again, rich opportunity to share the storytelling of why somebody chose it for that. For example, Walmart. Walmart always came up. Somebody took it for community because it's a building in our community. Somebody took it for diversity because you can get anything, and there's so many diverse things that you can buy at Walmart. Somebody took it for belonging because they and their friends worked there. And inevitably, I would get students who would take it as a representation of oppression. So, I mean, that's just a great way of saying, hey, your experience isn't necessarily wrong, but let's talk about it. Let's learn from each other. Let me better understand how you see the world. And it's that more inclusive approach that I had students for years who would contact me going, hey, I was driving down the road and I saw X, Y, or Z, and I thought of that photo assignment because I thought that would be a perfect picture. So again, to me, that's that kind of impactful, deeper learning. And I think this is, windows and mirrors theory is just rich for that kind of stuff. And again, the third option here, kind of broader category of how you can apply this in your classrooms and in your campuses, is to think about doing the you, me, and we broader approach of even giving more choice within those assignments. So instead of saying everybody's going to take those 4 photos, maybe that's one assignment option that's still getting at your goal. And students can choose to do this assignment or that assignment, or even in the content you provide. I will sometimes have, I get a lot of law enforcement students and I get a lot of nursing students in my class because on our community and technical college campus, those are 2 high program enrollment areas. And so I get a lot of those categories of students. So I will sometimes break out certain information designed for law enforcement, for nursing. And that's a great way to kind of target and personalize and give more options to your students to connect to the material on that more personal, inclusive level. So give students choice in maybe the content that you're providing and the ways that they can get assessed on assignment. Or like I mentioned in the Open Pedagogy project, that they can contribute to future content for other classes. Oh, just so exciting, I think. So again, it goes beyond course content and different ways of just like the textbooks and the images. It kind of takes it a little bit deeper. You can get into that design and redesign. It touches on so many of these great pedagogical approaches that are really humanistic, right? We talked about UDL this morning, and again, this is a great way. This might be seemingly overwhelming or just maybe, hopefully it's exciting you, but you can get even just one assignment and maybe give them a choice, or just change one quiz to an application of windows and mirrors instead. I use a survey function in my LMS. Our LMS is Desire to Learn, or D2L, and I will do surveys often because I think that's a quick kind of simple way for students to get challenged to think about windows and mirrors. I kind of go through some things and say, hey, was this a window or a mirror, and why? And they get all the credit if they complete the entire survey. It's not, again, a right or wrong answer. So there's a lot of different things that you can use it for in how you design your course, and then of course of how you deliver your course, thinking about how you treat your students. Are you calling on the same students? I know a lot of students or a lot of instructors here teach completely online, but you know, how we design our discussion boards, how we give feedback, how we grade, all of those type of things kind of come in, not just in the course design and redesign, but also in the delivery, right? That constructive criticism of how we give something positive, we talk about something constructive, and we end with something positive. Just a way to think about how we're interacting with our students. So we have just 6 minutes. I see Kevin just gave me a 6-minute warning. So in this next little activity, I want you to go ahead and in the chat, please share with me one way that you think you can incorporate the windows and mirrors theory or application or changing something up in your course. What is one thing that you think you can do right now in your course that you're maybe inspired by with the windows and mirrors? Is there something that you can see in there? Either typing a lot or we're being bashful. Here we go. Here's some humanizing literature analysis in English courses. Great. Giving background, the mathematician, asking students what they would ask that person if they were to interview them. Great. Or even like if you do have that interview assignment, they can interview and then maybe compare like what was a window and a mirror between who you interviewed and who I interviewed and what they said or shared. Great, look at all of them coming in now, fantastic. Moving away from Eurocentric content in humanities and arts, great. Again, going right to the content is a great way to start, but also think about how you assess students. Are there other ways that you can assess them? I do also want to mention, I don't think I see Maya in this particular presentation, but I gave a very similar presentation at the Open Ed conference in the fall. And one of the attendees, Maya, challenged me with this question. She said, is there another way that we could use windows and mirrors without calling them windows and mirrors? Because that kind of is a little site-centric, right? The implication of having to have sight to be able to use the windows and the mirrors, or that it kind of is just more sight focused. And so we kind of struggled with that one for a while. We kind of came up with the familiar, unfamiliar, and maybe both kind of concept. So we didn't really come up with a great metaphor to use in place of them, except for I think that we could do the you, me, and we. Where is this me? Where is this you? And where is this we? So Maya, if you are here, I think that's the best answer that I've come up with, and I'd love to hear if you've come up with anything different. But again, the windows and mirrors, I think, has a lot of things that we can do. This is Emily Stiles' paragraph. Some point you can come back and read this, but again, it's basically just reemphasizing the fact that we want to affirm our students and recognize the connection, the very last line, the connection, or she says, essential dialectic between self and the world. So think back to your courses, how you interact with your colleagues. Are there ways, even in maybe your meetings, the way you have student clubs, that you can incorporate the windows and mirrors? It doesn't just have to be the classroom, but certainly the classroom is a rich, ripe area where you can apply this. And think about those ways of reflecting and revealing. Think about how you can incorporate you, me, and we, and try to see if that is a way that you can help build inclusion, expand worldview, both yours and mine. I always learn from my students. I always learn from my colleagues when I attend these conferences. And it doesn't really matter what discipline or position. We always have more ways that we can connect with others. So with that, we are getting down there, and I just wanted to save a couple of minutes for any questions or comments. So Kevin, do people have the ability to unmute themselves, or is that just you and I?
They should be able to. Let me check that. And in the meantime, we'll repost the Padlet link for people to share their ideas and questions asynchronously. But I believe that people can unmute themselves if they have a question out loud. And if you can't,
fantastic.
Raise your
hand. And again, before I forget, let me share my link to the slide share. So there is the slide share that you have access, including this page that I believe should be showing right now, the kind of reference page. It doesn't really have a lot on there. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Brakonski. I was so excited to see she is presenting at this conference. So I don't think she's in this particular session, but she does a lot with humanizing classes. So I'm looking forward to hers, and that's a big shout out and plug for her conference session as well. But with that, I will stick around.
Please post it again. It was a direct message to me because I was giving you your time limits.
Thank you for that.
And Amber pointed out, yes, Michelle Pacansky-Brock is amazing. And she'll be speaking.
Is that how it's pronounced? Fantastic.
She'll be later today. She'll be speaking about humanizing with the syllabus, so liquid syllabus.
Great. So that's very, very exciting. And I think you can still see my email address up there. I am more than willing to answer any questions that may come up later if you get them later. I'll try to watch my Padlet throughout the week too, in case things come up there. You can go in and post some more ideas if you get them. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time, especially in the spring when I know it's super busy for everybody. And I appreciate you taking this 45 minutes to join us today. And if I can do anything for your campus, you want me to come, when we're able to come back face to face and do presentations live, I would love to come on your campus and help you learn more and explore more about the windows and mirrors, or like I said, just reach out with any questions. But thank you again to Kevin and the Peralta team for hosting this event and for letting me be a part of it. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, Kari. This is amazing. And I'm sure we're going to get more questions and comments and ideas in that Padlet space.
Great.
For those of you who are not sure about the schedule, I sent something to all the people who registered. We have events starting again in just 15 minutes. If you're interested and have time, if not, they will all be recorded like this one so that you can catch it when you have time. So thank you all for joining us. We'll keep the room open for a little bit, but we'll also be getting ready for the next session in the same room. And so we'll just be aware that we maybe have some jostling, but go ahead and ask your questions.
And I didn't see any questions come in the chat. Did you, Kevin? Did I miss any?
No, it looked like it was mostly comments and reactions to your activities. I didn't see any questions, but we're going to save the chat so that we can scrape it for ideas and all that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Kari. Thank you so much for your presentation. I actually have a question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brooke.
So I was really interested in what you were saying about assessment, and I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on how you see using this for assessment. Are you thinking of it more in terms of a labor-based, if students aren't, they can't be right or wrong, then when you're using this, are you using it pretty much in that sort of, if you do the work, you get the credit kind of assessment instead of this sort of mastery scale kind of assessment?
Definitely, because and you could work up to that, but I teach introductory courses, so it's kind of a great way for me to use that. And again, as many of our instructors here probably do as well, I teach completely online. And the first way that I would recommend it is to think about it as replacing one discussion board. So instead of having students go in and type how it's a window or mirror, which is still really rich, I converted that over to a survey where I took some of the common spots of where something was a window or mirror, and then I also layer it, like instead of it being binary, is it a window because of this or a mirror because of that? Those were the first questions, and the later questions then became, is it a mirror because of this, a mirror because of that? So I helped them learn that there's more than one way something could be a mirror. And then kind of get to one where it's like, how is it both and not just one or the other? So I kind of layer them even in the same survey. But then the great thing about our LMS is that survey then I can turn into a graph. And then that's that scaffolded layered approach where then they can go back and look at everybody's results and say, what did you find was the most surprising or interesting about the overall survey results? Pick one question, and then that goes back in the discussion board. And that's where they kind of talk about it. So again, as we all know, discussion boards, even if it's a 2-point assignment for an online instructor, can take 2 hours for us to grade, right? And so this was a really easy way for me to kind of move some of those assessments over, still get at the concepts, go and say, who did not complete this? And take those maybe 2 students and give the other 30 students 5 points for doing it, and go in and put a 0 for the 2 that just didn't do it. So it can be also valuable for you as an instructor. So that's just one way.
Kari, can I interrupt 1 second and ask you to make me the host once more?
Oh, I am so sorry. Yes.
Just so we can get our next speaker ready while you answer questions.
I am not finding you on my, there you are. There you go. I think you should have it. Yes, I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Hopefully, Brooke, that answered your question. And if not, I would feel more than happy to continue the conversation via email or some other format.